This laptop on the table behind me is the Titan 18 HX AI from MSI, and it's about as high spec a gaming laptop as you'll find anywhere on the planet. It's the non-Dragon version of the very cool Norse Dragon edition that myself and Leo saw back at CES earlier this year. I'll put some B-roll of it on the screen now. This thing that I'm looking at today is rocking a 5090, a Core Ultra 9 CPU, 64GB of memory, and 6TB of NVMe SSD storage. Wait until I tell you the price. Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kitguru. So let's start it off. This is without a doubt the most powerful and stacked laptop I've ever had the chance to have a play with. The spec list, which I'll go through in a moment, is kind of insane. But first, the price. I've got a US model here for the review, as often happens when we look at stuff like this, but the exact same spec here in the UK is £6,100. I feel like we need to pause for a second just to let that sink in. Over £6,000 for a laptop. If you're feeling really flush, you can go for the Dragon edition that I mentioned a minute ago. That's an extra couple of £100. For your measly 6K, you'll get the following specs, and this is quite the list. The CPU is the Intel Core Ultra 9 285HX, which has got 24 cores, consisting of 8 performance and 16 efficiency cores. The P cores run at a base clock speed of 2.8 GHz with a max boost clock speed of 5.5 GHz. And then the E cores, which handle like background tasks and stuff like that, they run a little bit slower at a base clock speed of 2.1 GHz, and then they can boost up to 4.6 GHz. And then for power, on the spec sheet, Intel state that the processor runs with a base power use of 55 watts, and then it's got a max turbo power use of 160 watts. For graphics, there was only one real option in a £6,000 laptop, an Nvidia RTX 5090 mobile. Pretty much the best mobile and desktop graphics processor you can get in the world at the moment. You wouldn't expect any less at this price, really, would you? The 5090 mobile has 24GB of GDDR7 memory running across a 256-bit memory bus. It's got 10,496 CUDA cores and all of the latest Nvidia tech, of course, like DLSS4 and multi-frame generation and all that good stuff. Taking a look at GPU-Z, we can see that the base clock speed is 1095 MHz and the boost clock speed is 1595 MHz, with the VRAM running at 1750 MHz. Power usage is stated as anywhere from 95 to 150 watts by Nvidia. For memory, we have 64GB of DDR5 running at 6,400 megatransfers, which, when I tested it with Ada, reported read speeds of 97,328 megabytes per second and write speeds of 89,333 megabytes per second. The craziness continues into the storage. Now, some of you regular viewers might have heard me moan about 1TB SSD capacities in some of the machines I've looked at in the past and in recent times. Well, good news, I've found the solution. You just have to spend £6,000. That'll bag you not one, not two, but 3 2TB NVMe M.2 SSDs configured in RAID 0. And that results in read speeds of 16,261 megabytes per second and write speeds of 9,651 megabytes per second. That's crazy fast, the fastest result I've had in any system, laptop or desktop, that I've ever reviewed. There is an argument to be made about redundancy and data loss when using RAID 0. If one drive fails, you've lost all of your data. But if that happened with a single drive setup, the result would be the same, so I can't moan too much. Inside, the laptop has one Gen 5 M.2 slot and 3 additional Gen 4 M.2 slots, so there's one free in its current configuration if you wanted to add in some more storage, but 6TB is more than enough for the majority of users. Apart from the people that want to play COD, you're going to need more. I'm joking, of course. The display on this model I have for review is an 18-inch 3840 by 2400 mini LED panel with a 120Hz refresh rate. There are a few other IPS panels listed in the spec sheet on MSI's website, a 240Hz Quad HD Plus model, and then a 220Hz Ultra HD Plus option. Coming back to talk about the screen I've had some time to have a look at though, I wouldn't go as far as to call it great, but it is good. Colours are vibrant enough and it gets very bright. The resolution is slightly higher than 4K. Again, it's 3840 by 2400, which is a 16:10 aspect ratio. The refresh rate will suit high fidelity gaming, I think, more, but if competitive games are your thing, then one of the higher refresh rate options that I just mentioned would probably be a better option. Let's talk battery then, because that's always a sticking point. Battery life is always an issue in massive power-hungry laptops, especially when you consider the 18-inch display on the one we're looking at today. The Titan 18HX contains a 4-cell 99 watt-hour battery, which lasted just over 4 hours when I tested it with Procion's Office Productivity Battery Life test. Now that's not amazing, 4 hours give or take, but just like the Omen Max that I reviewed very recently, these big massive gaming laptops, they're not designed for portability, they're desktop replacements, so you're not going to pick a laptop up like this with battery life and portability in mind, but that doesn't make it any less disappointing, just like with the Omen Max. The charger you get with this one is 400 watts, and as you expect, it's a massive and pretty heavy black brick, something that you have to factor in if you plan on lugging a laptop like this around in a bag.
With 20 years of PC manufacturing experience, CyberPower are the best in the business. With the largest range of parts available in the UK, our team of experienced builders will expertly build and test each system to be delivered to you the very next day. Check out cyberpowersystem.co.uk.
And speaking of weight, the Titan is indeed a Titan. It weighs a pretty hefty 3.6 kilograms. Design-wise, it's absolutely stunning, albeit very, very prone to picking up fingerprints. On the case, the chassis, the keyboard, pretty much everywhere you'll see fingerprints. It's finished in a combination of satin black on top and then grey on the bottom edge and the back edge. The underside has some very gamery sort of styling, very futuristic cyberpunky styling, and I really like it. I think it looks pretty cool. There's MSI branding on the back of the lid and then along the bottom bezel of the display. And then you've got Steel Series and Cherry branding flanking the keyboard. More on that in a moment. You'll see why that's relevant in a moment. The build quality of the Titan 18 feels great. The hinges are solid and opening it with one hand is mostly a pain-free experience. It'll occasionally move, but it stays put 9 times out of 10 when you just grab it with one hand and open it. Port selection is pretty good. There's 2 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 2 USB Type A 3.2 Gen 2 ports, 1 SD card reader, and as someone who uses cameras a lot, that was really nice to see. And then you've got a HDMI 2.1 port and a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port. And then for wireless connectivity, there's support for Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4. The keyboard. The keyboard has the best typing feel of any laptop I've ever tested. It's fully mechanical and uses Cherry MX ultra low profile switches. It's been made in collaboration with Steel Series, hence the branding that I mentioned a moment ago. It's got a robust and tactile feel to the switches. I love it, and any laptop keyboard that I try going forward is going to be a bit of a disappointment. Here's a quick sound test so you can hear what it sounds like. One thing I'm not a fan of though is the font used for the keycap legend. It looks like a keyboard from 10 years ago. And the trackpad, that's also very, very good. It's fully haptic and it's housed under the main chassis of the laptop. It's totally seamless and very, very smooth to the touch. Both the keyboard and trackpad are fully RGB backlit. RGB keyboards are nothing new, but the trackpad is very eye-catching and it gives the laptop a lot of wow factor. You can customize both the keyboard and the trackpad using the Steel Series app found on the laptop itself. There's a lot of lighting options to choose from, and you can get creative and create some custom lighting of your own with different layers if you want to. And just a side note, the trackpad doesn't flicker like this in real life. This is just the camera speed, not syncing up with the LEDs, but in real life it's smooth and the transitions are buttery. Overall, both input devices are exceptional. And I don't use that word very often. Built-in speakers consist of 4 2-watt speakers and then 2 2-watt woofers. They get pretty loud, but they're still firmly in the realm of slightly tinny sounding laptop speakers. And for the webcam, even though you're spending over £6,000, you still get a standard issue 1080p 30fps built-in camera that will service a meeting or two, but not much else. It's kind of dreadful. I was expecting something a bit better considering the price of this machine, to be honest. So far then, the Titan 18HX AI is a beast in every sense of the word. The spec list reads like Elon Musk's Path of Exile White House setup, and the design is simply stunning. There's no other word for it. Let's run through some games and see how it performs. I've tested every title we're about to look at using the laptop's native resolution. Again, that's 3840 by 2400, because I don't know about you, if I spent £6,000 of my own money on a laptop, turning down the resolution would not be on my bingo card. So to aid with performance, we'll take a look at each title with both native rasterized performance and then using DLSS, frame gen and some ray tracing where available too. Starting with Cyberpunk 2077 then, with the settings on their absolute maximum without any DLSS or ray tracing, and we can see performance of around 50 FPS. I'd hoped for higher considering the specs, but then again, this is a very demanding title to kick things off with. When you turn on DLSS 4 using the balance preset and enable 4x multi-frame generation, as well as turning on ray tracing, that sees the FPS more than double, moving up to north of 100, and that's with ray tracing set to ultra. So that's a nice bump in performance thanks to Nvidia's witchcraft. Next up is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Again, native performance hovers around the 50 FPS level. Not amazing, but also again, this is quite a demanding game. That's not to defend the Titan, this machine was pretty much built for demanding gaming. Using DLSS balance brings an increase, but not to the extent that we saw in Cyberpunk. During this opening scene, the FPS meter rose to between 70 to 80 and increased a bit more when we moved to the ramparts for some sword combat later in this section of the game. F124 runs a bit better natively. During the game's built-in benchmark, the FPS meter settled around the 100 to 110 sort of area, almost hitting the refresh rate cap of the panel. Add in some ray tracing using the high preset and enabling both balanced DLSS and frame generation. That's more about increasing the graphical fidelity of the game as opposed to a big increase in FPS. The meter rose only slightly to around the 110 to 120 level, but the game does look a bit better. Hogwarts Legacy at maximum settings ran at roughly 50 FPS with no scaling at all active. This is when running a lap around the pretty demanding area of Hogsmeade in the game. DLSS 4 unbalanced and 4 times multi-frame generation with ray tracing set to ultra sees the performance more than double. Again, not far off the display's refresh rate. Moving into Call of Duty then with some Black Ops 6, that follows a similar pattern to some of the other titles, with native rasterized performance of around 50 to 60 FPS, with some dips when fire and smoke are being rendered, and a few peaks when you head into the indoor areas during the game's benchmark. Enabling the DLSS balanced preset and turning on frame generation adds about 30-ish FPS to the performance. The meter hovers around the 100 FPS mark with the same dips and peaks we saw in the rasterized test a second ago. A Plague Tale Requiem ran at roughly 40 to 50 FPS during this scene early on in the game. The vegetation and level of detail in the environment make this a pretty challenging title for any machine when at max settings. And continuing the pattern of enabling DLSS, frame gen and ray tracing, again we see a slight increase in FPS moving up to around 70 to 80, while adding in that extra visual quality that comes with ray tracing. Moving into the second racing game in the lineup then with Forza Horizon 5, and we can see native rasterized performance is around 70 to 90 FPS with frame times of roughly 14 milliseconds. Turning on DLSS, still using the balance preset, while also adding in some frame gen and high ray tracing settings, has a similar effect to all of the other titles I tested on the Titan 18. FPS increases by around 20 to 30, frame time drops to around 8 milliseconds, and graphical fidelity increases with the addition of that ray tracing, showcasing the features on offer from the 5090. Finally, we have Assassin's Creed Shadows, which proved a bit of a challenge for the Titan when running it without any scaling in the laptop's native resolution. Performance was roughly 30 to 40 FPS throughout the game's built-in benchmark. That's not amazing considering the spec and the price of the machine. Performance roughly doubles after turning on DLSS, frame gen and ray tracing. The game looks much smoother and the FPS meter sitting higher than 60 at all times is more like what I'd expect to see on a modern game at maximum settings. Overall then, pure rasterised gaming performance may have looked a little disappointing on the surface, but we have to bear in mind that all of the titles I tested were set to their highest graphics settings and running at a resolution slightly higher than 4K. Then we factor in the addition of high to ultra ray tracing when we were testing with DLSS and FrameGen, and I think with those two things taken into account, I think it's fair to say the Titan did a decent job, I wouldn't call it an amazing job, a decent job of running some of the most demanding games I could throw at it. Realistically, if it were me playing on this laptop day to day, I'd do exactly that in the single player titles. I'd turn on all of the Nvidia bells and whistles, run games at their maximum resolution, and then just get stuck in. Finally, before I wrap up the review then, let's take a look at CPU power usage and temperatures, as this has been a serious area of concern for high-end Intel-based gaming laptops in the past. The Titan comes with 3 preset performance or power profiles, and you can switch between them in MSI Center. That's MSI software that you use to control a lot of things. Extreme performance, that places PL1 power limits of 200 watts and PL2 power limits of 220 watts on the processor. Running through a 10-minute Cinebench multi-core run while in this profile sees the CPU power usage initially boost to 226 watts, which in turn sees the CPU package temperature soar to around 100 degrees, quite toasty to say the least. This then has the knock-on effect of seeing clock speeds reduced slightly as the system prevents itself from overheating and reduces the power that it's using. During the initial boost phase, several of the P cores hit 5.2 GHz, but then drop down to around 4.8 to 5 GHz. So there is some throttling happening while in this mode, but it's nowhere near the level of some of the machines that I've looked at in the past. Then there's also the balanced profile, which sees the PL1 dynamic power limit decrease down to 140 watts. Processor performance while in this mode is quite similar to the extreme performance profile. Initially the CPU boosts and uses around 190 watts of power. P-core clock speeds hit 5.2 GHz, but then this time around we see longer sustained boost clock speeds, and with that temperatures. It's not until several minutes later that we begin to see some more substantial clock speed reductions due to the CPU throttling. Then finally, there's the eco mode profile, which is not really noteworthy from a performance perspective, as it places some very conservative dynamic power limits of 15 watts for both PL1 and PL2. This mode is for conserving battery life and when you just don't need a lot of power, as can be seen by the P cores running at around 1.4 to 1.5 GHz in Cinebench and the CPU using just that 15 watts and reaching only 57 degrees during a Cinebench test in the eco mode. That heat build-up when the CPU is under load leads to a keyboard temperature in the mid 50 degrees, which can be seen by this bit of thermal footage, and that is noticeable. I wouldn't say it's dangerously hot, but you can definitely feel it after you've been gaming for a while. With that being said, the laptop obviously ramps up its fans to combat the heat when things begin to get warm. Here's a clip of the noise levels produced by the fans when they're at 100% on the Titan 18 HX AI. So there we have it then, that was my full review of the MSI Titan 18 HX AI. And to wrap up how I feel about it, the first thing, it's expensive. £6,099.98 to be precise. That's eye-wateringly expensive. I'm not a car guy, I don't have a very nice car. That's almost as expensive as my car, it's not far off. But then the laptop definitely has, it's got the wow factor, like I said earlier. The RGB's eye-catching and the design is just stunning. It's just, you look at it and it's just a beautiful machine. But then with that beauty and the big 18-inch screen comes the fact that it's massive and it's heavy. It's not designed for portability at all, really, which is fair enough. That's not what they've made it for. But I think like it's a desktop replacement. If you don't have space for a desktop and you can afford a laptop like this, then I think you can afford to build an extension on your house and then get a desktop anyway. But if you want it, you want it. I get that. People like nice stuff, and it is very nice. It's got very, very good keyboard feel. The mechanical key feel is just great. It's the best keyboard I've ever used on any laptop. And then the haptic trackpad is just outstanding. It's smooth, it feels solid and sturdy, and it performs well. The throttling, the laptop's got the usual throttling issues that we see in high-end Intel-based gaming laptops, but it's not to the extent that I've seen with other different models from different brands that I've checked out. This thing does throttle, but not to a crazy amount. Overall, it's an insane price for an insane, in a good way, laptop. But if it were me, I don't know, this is just personal preference thing. If it were me, I'd still choose to build an even more insane desktop over buying this with my own money. But not everyone's situation is the same, I get that. Some people have got space constraints, like I said earlier. Some people have got the absolute need. They need a really powerful machine that they can take here, there and everywhere. And then some people just like sitting on the sofa and sofa gaming, or as the Americans call it, couch gaming. It's good for that if you like toasted legs, I guess. Anyway, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a like down below if you did, and let us know in the comments what you think about the Titan 18 HX AI laptop and its crazy specs and crazy price. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews, and hit the notification bell so you get notified about our uploads. If you go down below the video, you'll find links to our merch store, our Patreon page, our Discord server, and our website if you want to check any of that stuff out. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt, and that's been the MSI Titan 18 HX AI laptop. I will speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. See you later.